So Jen has a healing practice in Toronto, and she works with people in retreat format. She does one-on-one work, and she leads groups. She's a graduate of the Brennan School of Healing. She's a shamanic practitioner, and she also leads, they're called Shalom Retreats.
Shalom Retreats, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for taking the time to share a little bit about your experience with Thriving Healers and building your practice with us today. It's super generous.
It's my pleasure. When I saw your email come in about it, I was like, yes, of course. I wish I had that to see when I was starting, you know?
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about what your healing, we'll talk a little bit about what your healing practice looks like now, and then we can give people a sense of where you were before. We can kind of talk about that journey. But yeah, what does it look like? How is it going? How are you doing with it?
So I basically work one-on-one with people 4 days a week. I set my own hours, obviously, and I see about 4 to 5 clients a day. So what's that for? Like about 20 clients, 25 max. On the low end, and that vacillates. So sometimes it can go down as low as 12 in a week, depending on if spots get filled. I do hour-long sessions with them, and we do a mixture of like talk and energy work. Yeah, and yeah, it's been an interesting journey. It's taken a while to get my capacity up to be able to see that many people.
That's a lot of clients.
It's a lot of clients, a lot of energy to kind of mix in with. So I've had to really be conscious of like the hours I want to work, what I want versus what my body can actually handle, and yeah. And then when it starts to rain, it pours, and that can be also like so. There's very many people who want your your attention and your healing touch, which is amazing. So it's funny that I'm saying this, and it's like, oh, sometimes it's overwhelming that there are so many people that want to work with you.
Yeah. That's like a new problem, the problem from no people to so many.
Yeah. So I'm aware of the irony of that. And, so yeah, I guess like anything in life, you continuously are learning how to build your ability within it. And I guess for me, I'm working on, just capacity and boundaries, as well as delivering quality service in a good time frame. You know what I mean? Like really getting into it with people, and also honoring what I need in terms of what would be a win-win for me. As you know, the term, it's like, I really sink into that with every client. And even though some have more special needs than others, I try to honor my own needs first and foremost.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so this is a full-time income for you now.
Say that again?
This is a full-time income for you now.
Yeah, it's a full-time job. I don't do any other work except for my retreats and groups.
Awesome. It's amazing.
Yeah, I never thought I'd get there, but I got there.
Yeah, you got there, and it didn't even take you that long.
No, I think it was sort of a fear of success rather than a fear of failure for me. Yeah, and also just really how to do it. I kind of was really running into that a lot. Like, I have the vision, and I was really in alignment when I kind of first met Thriving Healers, but I didn't know how to take it from that place to like just the nitty gritty of like getting yourself out there and asking for what you were worth, and holding your value. I didn't really know how to do that, and I didn't even understand those concepts really. I just kind of was like, I'm here to serve.
Right.
Which is lovely and noble and honorable, and when you get into the business of doing it with 4 people, 5 people a day, it's they're like, yeah, you're serving me, keep going. And it's like, you have to really make it a
totally. And what like, tell me a little bit more about like before you joined Thriving Healers, what were you frustrated with? Like you said, you didn't know how did that show up? Like, what did it look like? Were you working with anybody? Were you feeling like you were undercharging? What was going on?
There was like a slew of things going on, to be honest. But I guess at the surface level, I wasn't making enough per month. I was dead tired at the end of the week, and I was like, I can't make enough per month. Like, there's no way I can actually see that many people, even if I had them to see.
So you were undercharging then, in some way?
I was definitely undercharging. I was definitely being really hard on myself about what it means to start a business and to get the ball rolling. So as soon as I would get a ball rolling, I would be mad at myself for it not rolling faster, being a bigger ball, all of those things. And then that would then just stop my flow, And I felt really alone in it all.
Yeah.
So it was just me in this practice I was building by myself out of my house. Like I could, like in a business, when you get a job, a job, you're like, all these people, you have to show up, and they, you bounce ideas off of them, and you become dynamic in that job. And that's kind of what I had done in my previous work life. I had been very dynamic in a group. And so one-on-one, I kind of was like, oh, I could just disappear and no one would know,
Okay. Yep.
So what that did was it made me feel like very undersupported in a place where I was struggling up a very steep incline, starting out on something new. And at the same time, not making enough money. So a lot of reasons to beat myself up, a lot of reasons to kind of feel like I was failing.
Right.
Which, like I said, just chops your flow down to nothing.
What were the things you were doing to get the clients that you did have?
I was doing a lot of reaching out and offering people sessions. Sometimes I would offer complimentary sessions. When I very first started, it was hard for me to charge anything. So I would have a donation box that said the word donation on it. And I was so uncomfortable with charging. I would say at the end of the session, they'd be like, oh my God, I feel amazing, whatever. You'd have and they were 1.5-hour sessions. So they were, a good length, what I thought. And I would be like, okay, I'm going to leave and wash my hands. And if you feel called, you can put something in the donation box, but don't, there's no pressure. And I thought that was like very, we're leaving it up to spirit in a sense. And I got the same amount of money almost every time, $60. Almost every time it was $60 in the box for 1.5 hours. And they would leave and I'd be like, okay, like that must be what I'm worth. That's what I told myself. And then eventually I was just like, pardon the language, but screw that. And just paying what they feel comfortable paying because they don't want to pay more.
Yeah.
So I had to really kind of say, what do I think I'm worth? And so then I brought it up to 80 and I said, my rate is 80, and then I brought it to 80 for 1 hour and 110 for 1.5 hours. And, so I kept on changing and making little incremental switches up, up with the dollar figure.
Yeah.
So that was sort of how I started.
Okay. And what was the thing that either drew you to Thriving Healers, or was like the moment when you were like, okay, I'm going to do this? Like, what was it about what we were sharing or that you needed that was a good fit for you?
So when I watched the webinar and had my complimentary call with you, I was like going into it being like, I'm just going to milk this for whatever I can get. And
I love your honesty about that.
I'm living in a deficit.
You told me that when we talked. You were like, I'm just going to, I'm not moving forward after this, but I'm really excited about getting something out of this call.
I felt like that was the honest way to approach it because I already felt guilty that you were giving me. And I knew like this is a way that you're going to try and build rapport with me. And but then by the end of the call, I was like, I need this. And what I recognized that I needed was, number one, I didn't have enough clients. They would come and they would maybe come for 3 sessions and then they would just fall off, which left me thinking, I suck, like they don't really need me. I don't want to make myself like, you need me. I don't want to tell them they need me.
Right.
I didn't feel good about that. And then I needed to make more monthly income.
Yeah.
I was making like, between $1,500 and $2,000 a month, which wasn't supporting my lifestyle at all. And I also needed the support. I needed a community to lean into that had a way of doing it that at least I could follow, with like some structural elements, but also just support of other people kind of walking the path alongside me, because I felt very alone in that regard.
Yeah, totally. I remember that too when I started. So what was it in Thriving Healers that helped you make the shift to having a full practice that's also financially providing for you? What was the things?
Yeah, there was a lot of things, but I feel like the one that's jumping to mind right now is that people get value when they put the value in. And so, I realized through just like doing the work and showing up on the calls that I was kind of in my own way with my ego, thinking like I needed to be really good at what I did. And the truth was, I needed to show up, I needed to be present, all of these things, but actually the healing, it really genuinely comes from them committing in themselves. And so and you really, Julie, you really gave me that reframe that I took to heart and started really preaching as my kind of, my sort of ideal way of wanting my business to work was like, I would tell my clients, look, you've had a good experience now. If you really want to have something change for you, then you need to like commit to yourself, and I'll provide a container. I'll commit to you if you commit to you. And this is what I think it's worth, you know? So that's when things really started to change, when I started offering packages and started valuing myself enough to offer a package and getting out of my own way, thinking that I had to do something for them.
Right. So the value comes from the relationship and from their commitment versus your having some magic that they could.
Yeah. At first I had to really kind of test that theory out. And now, you know, it's been a couple of years, and now it's like, oh, of course I bring my magic. Of course I bring things that wouldn't be there if they had just given money to a machine and sat in a room with a machine the whole time, or just any person off the street. Yes, I recognize that I bring tremendous value, but also the bigger piece was that it was really, my value does nothing if they don't want to be there. And so I needed to really get committed clients. And once I started realizing that and kind of voicing that and making that what I wanted, people started coming around that weren't committed. I said bye-bye. People came around that were. I said hello. So it just started like carving out a path that my business wanted to take. And that's what, you know, like the universe filled it with that.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing is there was a shift in the mindset. There was that reframe that you're mentioning. And then there was also a shift in the model and like actually how you were doing it. And those two things made a change together.
Definitely a shift in the mindset. Definitely a shift in the model, and also the support to kind of work through the kinks as you do that, because I got all that information on the webinar that you gave me. Like I could have done all that with the info, but it was like, you sit there that first time saying, I want you to come see me for, 3 or 6 months, and I want you to pay me a big chunk of change right now, because I believe you're going to, do things with that. And I believe you'll heal. You'll find healing with that. That, that's uncomfortable the first time you say those things.
Yeah.
So to go back to the group and be like, and they could be like, okay, well, person X over here has already done it and they're doing really great, and this is what they saw. Person Y over here needed to hear that because they're just about to do it. And then, you and Jonathan being in the leadership of like, here's more of like how you need to change your mind in order to kind of stretch or expand to hold that new paradigm.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Yes. So when you started charging more and asking for a bigger commitment to support them, what did you notice changed with the clients? Was there, like you said before, it was like 3 sessions and then they fell away. Like in that time, 3 or 6 months that you work with someone, did you notice differences in what your clients were getting for results or the experience?
Yeah, well, everyone was different. But I'd say that if I had to like generalize it, people started feeling way more supported. They came in knowing that we were going to go deeper, so they allowed themselves to go deeper. And so it stopped being like a tune-up at a mechanic's garage, and it started being like a rebuild of the vehicle, if you look at that as a metaphor. And when they allowed that to happen, they started having tremendous shifts in their life,
Mm-hmm.
And I realized I could hold even less. Like I if I have any sort of things that I'm trying to change, it's the case of the overcommitted healer. And the more that they came back and said, this happened to me. And I was like, oh, how did that? I had a lot of experiences like, oh, I didn't do anything. So I realized I could really have a lighter touch. And a lot of the things that were happening, the container was holding it for them. They were creating their own change in the container, their own spiritual energies that they called in, whatever spiritual energies we called in together, were continuing to work on them during the time we had. So they would come with, it depended on what their issue was, but they always came with like, oh, I see this awareness now where I'm able to be in this tough spot that I came to you with, but I can also be there and love myself, or be there and it's okay. It's just like, yes, this is happening, but it's okay. It's not like this tremendous catastrophe. It's just something that's happening.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Super rewarding, I would imagine.
It's rewarding, and then it's also like humbling, because I recognize that just by creating that container with me and with them, and them, really committing to themselves, something's happening that's way beyond my doing.
Yeah, and the reason you can create that container is because of the work that you've done and the growth and the mindset shifts before and after Thriving Healers. Like, who you've become as a healer is the space that that container, right? So it is your magic, and it also is their magic. It's that relational field.
Yeah, I guess I'm continually humbled by it, because it's very easy to do work and not see results in the outer world, but you feel them in the inner world. And, in your own personal healing work, you can be like, yeah, I feel more confident, but you can't really quantify it. And what Thriving Healers helped me do was like take a business from not paying my bills to like, yeah, this is like a meaningful occupation that actually I can take vacations, and I can book, like create my own hours, and I can say no to a client. And when that feels uncomfortable, that's on me to do the work around that. Like it was a quantifiable sort of measurement of my own success in my personal healing, as well as then you see all these people changing in their lives, and then they go forward and change other people's lives just by how they start thinking, right? Their reframe.
Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about that.
It's concentric circles of like healing that go out now.
Yeah,
It's
amazing. Yeah. So what were your, I mean, you kind of shared them a little bit, but like what were your biggest wins for you, either personally and professionally?
Well, the first one was the quick start. That was my biggest win, because in my first year of Thriving Healers, basically that was where I focused most of my attention. There's like Thriving Healers is this huge bulk of information and support and all of this stuff. It's really quite dense when you get into it. There's a lot of like videos to like help you through all these things. And basically what I was capable of was saying, hey, I'm going to commit to you for a package, and you're going to commit to me, and let's just see what we build from that. So the fact that I reached out to people and offered them, that was my biggest win. And what that took was the enrollment call, right? I needed to master how to offer that gift to them and create a win-win for both of us. So that was the number one win, was being able to master an offer.
Making an offer, enrolling a committed client, making a substantial good money from that.
That's right. That was probably the biggest win that took me through the first year. And then now that I'm in the implementation group, I started a group in the summer. So for me, I'd always run retreats even before Thriving Healers, and they were sort of like my act of service. Again, it was like this humble, noble kind of retreat that I ran, these Shalom retreats. But what they were was, I still do them, but they're just like one weekend, 3 times a year, that's really just a one-off. And what I was trying to build was something that had momentum, sort of like Thriving Healers. Mm-hmm. So I started a group in the summer, and that group brought in, another, a month's income just by enrolling these people who are already my clients. So it was like taking that quick start and applying it to a group foundational kind of thing. I didn't really overthink it. I kind of just went with something, and it turned into a group. And now I'm doing my second group, my second iteration online. The first one was in person. So I'd say the big win this year was learning how to work with groups. Also just getting familiar. Like for me, I have to do it organically, getting familiar and comfortable with what they need, following the pulse of the group and the wave over a period of time. Like right now I'm doing in 3-month chunks. Mm-hmm. My goal next year is to roll out like a 9-month or a 1-year kind of program.
It's incredible. It's awesome. So you went from one-on-one to groups, and successfully leading and filling groups. Yeah,
I would say there's been a lot of personal edge pushing that after you do it, you're like, oh my God, that was amazing. But before you do it, there's a lot of reason to just sit on your heels and wait for it to be the perfect time, which it never is. And so Thriving Healers always kind of says like, hey, well, here's the next module. And you're like, I'm not ready to start that one yet, because I'm still doing this one. And then, there's no pressure, but I'm at the place now where it's like, I'm sort of doing year one, the second half of year one in year two, and sort of thriving in it in my own way.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. We give that content, and it's impossible for this to not be organic and like natural for everybody, that they, for some people that only want to do one-on-one, some people will just want to do groups or whatever, and I always like to think that, we get the training that we need, and then of course it's going to take us, we're going to implement it at the right time for us, depending on our own personal growth and all of that. So it sounds like you're following your own pulse, your own growth and all of that, integrating it in the right time. Still very quickly.
I guess. I actually was looking at the numbers today. I was telling my friend, like, here are my numbers. And she's like, whoa, you've doubled your growth year over year. And I was like, is that good? And she's like, well, if you were on the stock market, I would invest in you.
Right.
Interesting. Because as she's saying, like 100% growth year over year is
100%
good.
growth 2 years in a row.
Yeah. So I started making, 1,500 to 2,000 monthly. And now I'm making somewhere between, 75 to 8,000 monthly.
It's amazing.
With all the groups and everything rolled in. And I'm making a yearly income of about 80 grand. And it would be very nice for me to make a yearly income next year of something like 120 to 150. That would be ideal.
That's the goal.
Yeah. And again, it was all, I think for me, because there's so much in Thriving Healers, there's a part of me that wants to do it well.
Yeah.
And I had to just let go and let it be organic for me in terms of growing it at the pace that felt like my container, my own individual container could hold it.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of support for that too. So yeah, that's the goal.
That's wonderful.
120 to 50.
Yeah. Totally doable. Love it. Yeah. And given your track record, sounds like you're on track for that.
Yes. Again, like every year I get there, I'm like, that doesn't seem possible. And then there it is. So yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Really, really incredible. Like what did you have to put into it in order to get those results?
Well, I had to show up, so I showed up for all the calls. I did all of the modules, at least watched them. Even if I wasn't ready to do the work, I watched them. And then really the bigger piece was the inner work around what came up when I implemented whatever was being asked of me through the program. So what do you feel when you make an offer? How do you feel in that moment? What's the inner work around that? So there was a lot of like self-value work that I did. There was a lot of like self-kindness, like telling myself it's okay, you're not moving as quickly as you want to. Because when we first met, I was like, I want to make 100 grand right away. And you were like, well, it's possible. And it would have been possible. It was like I had to keep slowing myself down in the first year because I had to move at the pace my system could move at.
Yeah,
otherwise,
so you could do it grounded. Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been organic and authentic, and then I would have been sort of marketing for the sake of marketing.
Right. Not what we want.
Right. So I guess to answer your question is the inner game stuff was the most important work for me. And then the external version of that is marketing, I think, being seen.
Right. Taking those steps, knowing how to take those steps. Yeah.
And just taking them even if you don't really know how to take them. Like you'll be told how to take them, but then sometimes when you try something new, it's just all like fuzzy and in your head. Right. So you just stumble through it until you're done and you're like, okay, now what happened? Let's iterate.
Yes. Great. Yeah. Business is an iterative process. That's how it goes. We try something, we see how it goes, and you're a perfect example of that.
Yeah. You have to be really good at, not seeing failure as actual failure, but as a learning situation.
Yeah, that's true. It's just
even with clients, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Like I have no idea what I'm going to do right now. You're presenting me with this thing. I'm going to go on a limb and risk into something that I feel in my gut. Mm-hmm. And maybe it works and maybe it doesn't, but I learned something from that. So
yes,
that's kind of been what the inner game's been about, is trusting my impulses and forgiving myself if I was off the mark, but also really honing my intuition.
Yeah. So for someone who's not in Thriving Healers and is hearing that you did the inner game, how was that supported by Thriving Healers?
Well, we had supervision, right, with Jonathan. So every time I had anything come up, it was there. And also with the business calls, it was also kind of supervision, right? Like anything could go to any call. You could really bring up anything. There were some videos in the videos. But I think for me, mostly, it's just about the support of the group. So like saying to a group, here's where I feel like I fell down. Here's where I need some help, and the group responding. And in that place, it's yes, there's just this surface level of like, problem solution, but there's also an energetic thing that happens where you just feel supported and lifted, and you get to sort of process it in a way that, that you would have, say, in your training. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just a real collective that holds the energy that you're trying to process. So it sort of gives it a boost.
Yeah. Cool. So for someone who totally makes sense. Yeah. It makes really clear. Just helping people who are watching maybe get a sense of like, and actually, how did we do that? in the structure of the program. So for someone who might be watching and hearing your journey and thinking about like just being in a place where they have not yet grown their healing practice and want to, why would you recommend Thriving Healers? Like what would you and why would you?
I definitely would recommend Thriving Healers, and I have. I think I brought something like 6 or 7 people to the program. Yeah, and probably more, because I really am a big advocate of people. Well, number one, I know people will have this impulse to help, and that's a beautiful inclination. And sometimes with that comes this idea that you're not allowed to make money doing it because that's dirty or wrong or somehow selfish. And the truth is, I guess I'd want people to like realize that when they invest their money in something like Thriving Healers, what they're getting paid back, like what they learn to do and ask for in their practice, helps finance their whole life, which gives them an ability to actually help. So it's this sort of circle, and it's like the snake biting its own tail. It need to charge in order to have the energy and capacity to then offer more gifts.
Yes.
It's a really important piece of it that I feel like is missing in a lot of trainings, because again, there's like this real selfless, noble kind of calling that brings you there, which I think is also important.
Yes.
And then when you get out into the real world, you're like, oh, I need to make money doing this. And if I don't, then I become depleted. I become, broke.
Yeah. Unable to help, unable to serve. Yeah.
Yeah. And resentful usually as a result.
And sitting on all that potential is very, very, very painful. And that desire and that longing.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess when I joined Thriving Healers, I had no money, and I definitely wasn't intending on spending it. And what I would tell someone else in that same position is that if it calls to you, if your soul says, like, if your inner knowing says, like, I need this in order to take the next step, take it, because you will eventually meet your goal with the support and with the tools that are offered there. And that's basically what you're wanting, right? Everything that keeps you away from that, if you feel like it's a yes for you, is really just fear. And that's just going to help you to sit right where you are.
Yes, totally. Thank you. Anything else you would want to share?
No, I don't even know what I said, but that was pretty much, I mean, I know what I said, but in terms of, is there anything else that you think that you would like to ask me a question about?
I think that's it. I just really love you, and I feel so grateful, and thank you for doing the work, showing up, being part of the community in the way that you are, and also bringing your gifts forward and being a model and example, because it's really incredible. It's an inspiration.
Well, I feel the same way about you.
Thank you.
Thanks for giving me the platform to do so. And all my clients, thank you too.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.